The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sabina, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Relevate. We have a lot to go over today, so I will be brief. But before we get started, I would like to introduce our presenter, Stephen Rayo, Relevate's CEO and expert in the topic of email marketing. We will be answering any questions towards the end, so please ask by using the questions box on your right. If we do not get to your question during the webinar, we will email you a personal response. And with that, I'm handing over to Stephen Rayo to get the webinar started.
Thank you, Sabina. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. As Sabina mentioned, if you want to go ahead and post your questions as we go through it, and we'll answer as many as we have time for towards the end. What we wanted to really cover today, and hopefully you'll get from this webinar, is some of the benefits of email marketing, an understanding of why you can't run acquisition through some of the very popular marketing software, DSPs, and marketing automation platforms. Define the difference between the approach in customer marketing and acquisition marketing through email, and give you a roadmap to success. So, the first question, why email marketing? Why should I be concerned with this? Here's a study that shows over the past 4 years that email has seen a 400% increase in customer acquisition. So that tells you it's working, and it works because you have more frequent opportunity to communicate at a lower cost. You can quickly execute email campaigns and take advantage of certain triggers or timely events. It gives you a feedback loop that'll give you a clear window into who's engaging and why. It provides for faster test cycles so you can try different things out to see what people are interested in and what they're engaging with. And really allows you, uniquely than any other channel, allows you to very keenly target your message to the right person at the right time with the right offer. And it's all about ROI. Simply, it works. This is a report. Marketing Sherpa does a lot of reports, and they did a survey of CMOs and found that 60% of all CMOs said they were currently making money with email marketing today, with an additional 32% said that they expect that they will be making a return on investment in the not-too-distant future. So that's basically 92% of all people that are engaged in some amount of email marketing are either making money on it today or hope to make money on it and expect to make money on it in the not-so-distant future. Okay, so we've showed you, that people are actually successful in acquiring customers through email, and we showed you how they're doing it profitably. Here you can see how there's more money being put to this channel and more focus on it by CMOs. And it just shows you that it's not just a passing thing, that they're continuing to invest on it, and the more tools and the better sophistication comes out, the more it's going to become an important channel for you. So this is a question I get often, is you're really trying to draw this distinction between customer marketing and acquisition email marketing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but what we're really focused on in this webinar is the acquisition email marketing. The CRM and customer marketing is pretty well addressed today through a lot of the software and platforms that are out there. So to draw a difference between the two, it's important to define them. CRM, or customer email marketing, is where you're sending an email to either your current customer or to someone who's opted in or expressed interest in receiving email communications from you. There's a lot of very common and pervasive platforms that are very effective at nurturing, cultivating, triggering, and otherwise eliciting response from a customer who's already engaged. ExactTarget, Marketo, Eloqua, Silverpop, Constant Contact, to name a few. But acquisition email marketing is quite a bit more challenging, because here you're sending emails to prospects and leads that you don't have a prior relationship with. They didn't ask that you communicate with them. And I would also throw into this bucket appending email addresses to your customer file, because again, this may be a customer, but it's not someone who's previously expressed interest in you sending emails to them or communicating with you via email. And it's difficult, but it's very doable, but it requires a very different approach and set of tools and skills than simply pushing the send button. So what? Can't I just run acquisition campaigns through my existing service? And assuming you use one of these, the answer is absolutely no. If you check every one of those, you'll find that they're very defiant in their resounding no answer. They're very vigilant in this regard. Here's a quote from the ExactTarget's policy that basically requires that you certify that you will not use it for anyone who's not already consented or opted in to receive email. So a lot of people think, well, that's canned spam. Well, no, it's not canned spam. I get this question quite a bit, and there's a lot of misconceptions about canned spam. Canned spam does not require that you receive permission from to email someone. It's really quite timid, and simply requires that the email is clear and conspicuous, and that's really what's addressed here. You identify it as an advertisement, that it provides an actual postal address in the event that someone wants to follow up on the sender of the email, and allows people to quickly and easily opt out. So that's really the main tenet of canned spam, and it's really the ISPs and their email filtering algorithms that make it difficult to do prospecting through email, as they try to protect their users from unwanted or spammy emails. Unfortunately, legitimate offers from reputable brands get caught in that same spider web called email filtering. Just some important points about open and click-through rates, which are the typical measurement, at least the typical initial measurement of the success of an email campaign. It's important that you know that email open rates are artificially low. Open rates are basically recorded using a tiny one-by-one pixel in the message that, if not displayed by the recipient software, does not get recorded as an open. So your actual opens are going to be higher than what is reported by any of these software that's out there. Most, or not most, but many softwares, including Outlook and certain mobile clients, default to not showing images, and you have to enable images. So the actual open rates are actually higher than what is going to be reported to you. One of the most important things that I think everyone should get out of today's webinar is understanding what really makes it work, and it's really about engagement. And then we look at engagement in terms of a ratio, and the ratio is positive to negative engagement. So no engagement or a lot of negative engagement will get you bounced or blocked or get your email routed to junk mail. Positive engagement is considered an open or a click, and for definitional purposes, negative engagement is when they unsubscribe, or more often, and to some extent more damaging, is where they click the spam button in the different software, where they're notifying the ISP that they view this email as unsolicited and or unwanted. And the ISPs look at that to help them determine whether or not the people receiving this email want to continue to receive it. And you really want to keep what we call this complaint rate down to less than 0.2% of all delivered emails, and generally and ideally less than 0.1%. So a small number of complaints can really derail your campaign. The good thing about email, one of the good things, is it really is a test and learn process, and you can get better by trying different creatives, different subject lines, different audiences, and really understanding the cadence and tempo of the communications. So don't get discouraged. So as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to kind of give you what we think of as the roadmap to success, which really goes through the different points that really cover an effective email campaign. We'll talk about each one of these in detail, but it's campaign strategy, defining the success metrics, identifying the right target audience, making sure you're deploying clean data, ensuring that your creative is engaging and optimized for the different devices, that you ensure that it's deployed expertly. We'll talk about that. And then analysis and tuning. And I would add to that reporting as a subset of analysis and tuning. So campaign strategy, that's the first stop on the road. Here's where you're asking, what are we doing? what are our goals? What do we hope to achieve by this campaign? Defining and thinking about, are we selling something? Are we trying to build an audience, an opt-in list, or is it a branding exercise? Really take the time to define your expectations. Go the next step and determine what success looks like for you. Build the business case. There's a lot of times we get clients that say, what sort of open and click rate should I expect? And the answer is it depends a lot. Every campaign is different because the open and click rate is very much a function of your brand, your offer. Deployment, all the expertise that goes into it is very important, but at the end of the day, it's your brand and your offer that's going to help influence whether it's highly engaged with or not. But one of the things we do is we take our clients through the business case. Rather than determining what you think that open and click rate will be before you start deploying, figure out where does it need to be for you to be profitable. And creative testing and targeting, we're going to cover a little bit more later. And of course, you have to figure out, can I do this myself? Do I need to hire an expert, a consultant, or a company to help me with my acquisition marketing? All right, so the next step is defining the success metrics. Unlike more traditional marketing and advertising, you can actually see and measure whether your message was viewed, engaged, or the recipients deemed it unwanted. You get very clear and very immediate reporting on how people are receiving that message. It's important to note that most published email campaign performance, if you do Google search out there, most of that is really speaking about customer or CRM marketing. So an open rate above 10% for an acquisition campaign is highly unlikely. It happens, we've seen it, but I don't. In most cases, if you're setting your expectations for an open rate higher than 10%, you may be disappointed. But it could be that you don't need a 10% open rate, or you don't need a 12% click-through to be successful. And this is where we really recommend going the next step and really calculating what your ROI is under various assumptions. And we have some different tools to help in that regard. Really look at the different engagement, the reporting. Here's some sample reports that we use to assess the daily response, from when it was first deployed and open rates, and as you can see, they always subside from, the first 24 to 48 hours thereafter, as you're going to get most of your engagement early on, but you do see ongoing engagement over many days, as not everybody reads their email first thing in the morning like I do. Deliverability and response trend, that'll just show you kind of your delivered versus your bounce. It could be a hard bounce or soft bounce and how that's trending over time. And then specifically the specific links in the email that people clicked on and engaged with. This is just a subset of some of the reports that will assess how it's going. As we mentioned, you really need to build the business case. And this is something we do on the front end with all of our clients, not all of our clients, but we take them through this process. Know where you need to be profitable. Don't guess, don't infer, don't impute, but compute it. And do the analysis before you start. Here's some different assumptions, and we have a profitability calculator that we'll make available to everybody on the webinar that we'll send you under separate cover, so you'll have access to this to play around with and assess your own profitability on different campaigns. So basically, setup costs, and for us, we don't charge a setup cost. Ours is really broken into the data cost and then the deployment cost, but there are companies that charge setup fees, so that may be a fee that your provider charges. How many are going to be part of the campaign? So we're going to deploy to 1 million people. The delivery rate, even though you'll never get 100% delivery, I put in 100% here because we and many providers will only charge if it's delivered. So that's something you want to have a discussion with your provider. Do you charge only on delivered, or do you charge on any attempted sends? Conversion rate would be conversion once they've clicked on and landed on your landing page, how many of them turned into being customers? That'd be an assumption you'd have to derive. Number of touches. Is this going to be a single touch campaign, which we definitely wouldn't recommend, or part of a variable rate, a variable message multi-touch campaign where you're building upon whether or not someone interacted with the previous message. Typically, we do it in 3 and 4 touch campaigns. And then plug in your cost for the data, the list rental, and your deployment cost. And then here we plug in just a starting point on open rate and click-through rate, and it'll actually calculate a full sort of contribution margin P&L for you after you plug in your lifetime value. What is the customer worth to you? And this thing right here basically shows the different intersections, probably difficult to see on my screen. Down the left-hand side, you have various possible open rates. This one goes from 0 to 7.5%, and then you have different click-through rates. And it shows you the intersection of the two, the point of profitability. See, red is unprofitable, and green is profitable, and the shades speak to the degree of profitability. So again, this is something we'll send out to everyone. You can play around with it and check to see where you need to be for profitability. All right, the next step is really the target audience. Unlike maybe some forms of marketing, it's very important that you really nail the target audience, because despite the low cost of email messaging and sending someone an email, you really need the audience to engage to make sure that your emails continue to make it to the inbox. Because if they don't get into the inbox, they won't get engaged with, and you will basically waste the investment that you've put to this. To identify the audience, you may want to ask your provider to profile, to take some of your customers and profile what your best customer looks like so you can find more like that. We'll call those lookalikes. After you've identified the audience, make sure you can match the offer to the audience. So if it speaks to young people between the ages of 18 to 25, then your creative and your offer needs to speak to that audience. And then really look at specific targeted data elements, targeting by geography, looking at sort of recent triggers, someone who just moved or maybe is in the market for a car or in the market for something. Look at other ways to very finely target who you're trying to reach, because a positive engagement, you'll see later, leads to positive engagement. So here you go. This is sort of, engagement's really circular. Higher delivery percentage leads to higher inboxing. Higher inboxing leads to higher open rates, and higher open rates will lead to higher click-through rates. It sounds redundant, but it really does feed itself, because if you have very low open rate, very low click-through rate, what you're going to find is you're going to have very low delivery, because you're going to get, in many cases, soft bounce or blocked by the ISP. So the things go hand in hand. Success breeds success, and failure will lead to additional failure. Clean data. So this is sort of like, you have to do this. This is a must-do. An email validation process will maximize your deliverability and your inboxing. It doesn't ensure you're going to get delivered, but it's going to get your audience deliverable to a high percentage, in the range of 95 to 97% if you work with a very good validation protocol. This basically checks the syntax, make sure it's syntactically correct, removes any fraudulent or fake addresses or generic catch-all ones like no reply at noneofyourbusiness.com. It also, for us in particular, we actually screen it for spam traps and honeypots, and we actually run it through a suppression database that we've compiled of about 270 million bad emails, meaning hard bounces, persistent soft bounces, spam traps, complainers, people that you basically don't want to include in your email campaign. You need to do this as close to the actual deployment of your email as possible, because every day, every week that goes by, that data becomes aged, and some accounts will become inactive. And ISPs don't look very kindly on hard bounces. Hard bounces to them are a reflection of a spammer using old cultivated email that they're throwing a lot of things at the wall and hope something sticks. Avoid complainers. it's difficult to do. If you knew who was going to complain, you wouldn't send to them. We actually sometimes employ different models to filter out the likely complainers. And the last one is just, try to make sure that that data you're using is active. It has a heartbeat. There's been some recent activity associated with that email address. Otherwise, it could be a honeypot, which is a sort of a recycled email address that ISPs look at to see if you're likely taking old data and trying to redeploy it. Engaging creative. If you think of the creative, it really is broken down into three sections in the actual email, and then the fourth section being the landing page after someone clicks on something. The from line. The from line is the friendly from line that would be right up here. This is the company that is actually wanting to market and communicate to them, even though it may be sent by a third party. So when we do it, we send it on their behalf, but they're the from line. They're the sender. That's who it appears to the user it's coming from. Then you're looking at the subject line. Let's be internet friends. So this is what someone's going to see and look at before they open the email. And then the body, above the fold and below the fold, we'll discuss that later, what the call to action is, and then of course the landing page. As mentioned, from, if you think about the first part of it, the from and subject lines, the from, you really want to, it's either your company name or the brand name or something that's going to be identifiable, most identifiable to the people receiving it. Because they're going to make a determination as to, is that a trusted brand? Is that someone I want to open an email from? Again, so though we are deploying on your behalf, the from line is your brand. It appears to everybody that it's coming from you. But it's being sent through our domains, our servers. The subject line is really the equivalent of the envelope if you think of direct mail. And you want to incorporate something that's going to connect with the audience. Maybe it's a brand, a town, or some sort of compelling call out like an invitation. You really want to avoid some spammy words. These might seem like good ones to put in the subject line, but the ISPs really filter on some of these things, because ones with some of these words have a high likelihood, according to ISPs, of being spam. Be careful in the length of the subject line. Ideally, it's less than 40, but you shouldn't exceed 70 characters in the subject line. And make it as personalized and specific as possible, because that's what's going to get you opened. And open, as we mentioned, leads to more engagement. Now, when you think of the body of the creative, use the real estate wisely. The traditional term above the fold, below the fold is even more relevant when it comes to email marketing, because every different device that an email is read on has a different amount of real estate. So you really want to be mindful of what you put in that top part of the email. Make sure it's clear why they should read on and what the call to action is, what's in it for them. About 50 recent studies suggest, I've seen them anywhere from 55 to like 70 of emails now read first on a mobile device before it's ever seen, or if it's ever seen, on a desktop device. So developing good creative, it's as much science as it is art, but there's some key things that you can do to make sure that it's optimized for email engagement, deliverability, and some other things we go into later in terms of spam scoring, inbox testing, et cetera, with the creative before it gets deployed. So creative optimization, there's a variety of different software out there that will take that message that you've designed, that creative, that HTML, and render it across many different platforms, many different devices, mobile, desktop, different browser versions, etc. Again, it's important, more than half of them are now on some sort of mobile device, so you really need to look at how it's going to render on all the different devices to make sure that the real estate is used wisely, that the fonts, the formatting conforms and is well rendered in all the different devices. You want to adapt to certain sort of email design principles. It generally includes, shorter copy, larger font, smaller image sizes, making the call to action very clear, and finger-friendly design. Again, more important when you get into the increase in mobile device with the smaller screen, that it's really optimized for that, for those devices and those platforms as well. And then consider the post-click activity for mobile friendliness. After they've clicked on your link, they're going to presumably go to a landing page. Make sure that landing page is optimized for different clients, different devices, and different versions of browser software. And generally, you don't want the message size to be more than about 40 kilobits. So that's all in with the header information, anything in it. You don't want to ever include attachments. But the total size of the email with all the embedded images and the HTML shouldn't be more than 40 kilobits per email. Here's an example of how the HTML gets rendered and tested against different devices before it's displayed. You can see in the first example, we have an email where the image isn't being displayed. It displayed fine on a desktop, but when we looked at it, this is I'm not sure what software client this is, but on this particular client, the image doesn't render, so we had to fix that. In this example, this is an Android device, I believe. And you can see where the text, it looks great in every other version, but on the Android, the text is getting cut off on the end. So you really need to look at the creative and look how it's going to render on all the different devices. If you knew exactly what device they're going to use to read your email, it'd make it easier, but our testing will review it over 40 different device, operating system, and hardware variations. Okay, so here's where we're actually going a little bit more in detail in the creative testing. We're looking, over here we have some different reports. There's a subset of reports that we use, but we're analyzing and testing the creative before it's deployed. You're running it through here, spam scoring it against a lot of the different spam scoring software out there. It's looking at image ratio. It's looking at keywords. It's looking at a lot of different things that gives you some suggested changes. And then here we're actually testing the message. Some of this got cut off. We're actually testing the message to see the likelihood that it will reach the inbox, all other things being held constant. And then, when you actually you have your creative ready to go, you've made sure it's going to render properly and all the different things. It has a good chance to inbox. Really, the next part is really about engagement and making sure that you have the creative right. And the creative would involve the body of the message, the subject line, format. And typically what we would do is we would take 2 to 3, maybe as many as 4 subject lines and multiple creatives and look at all those different combinations and look at which one is getting the best engagement. Sometimes it's things you don't expect, like the color. We had one that went out and, red is generally a no-no a lot of times in marketing, but the red one, for whatever reason, was popping for people, and that was the one that we deployed the most to, because that was the one that was getting the most engagement. You want to test it to, maybe 5 to 10% of the overall audience to see which creative is working the best, which combination. All right, the next part, expert deployment. The one thing I like to say to clients is, it's not just about pushing the send button. And for me, I hate the term, sometimes people say, do you blast email? And the answer is no, we don't blast it. We send email, because blasting is a little bit too crude and rudimentary. And in fact, blasting an email will lead to a lot of hard bounces, soft bounces, and junk mail. So 4 things can happen once you push the send button. Hard bounce. There's something fundamentally wrong with the data. The email address is not correct. The recipient server is saying we don't have this email address, and it's a permanent block. That email will not be delivered. Soft bounce. Well, there's some minor exceptions there, but a soft bounce could be something simple, temporary, like the mailbox is full, the email server is having some downtime or an outage, the email message is too long for the filtering for that particular email server. But more often, the thing that is most challenging is the ISP filters, as we talked about it before, where they're looking at the engagement or lack thereof and determining that this is not an email that people want to see, and they're bouncing it. Key things here: start slow and ramp up. The spammier the creative, the slower the delivery needs to be. You know, all the different ISPs, they all have their own private algorithms they don't publish. So it's a lot of test and learn and monitoring. And know that a high quantity of unsubscribes or complaints will derail your campaign. All right. Key thing, an absolute no-no. I've seen a couple of people had done this before, and then they called up, but don't ever use your primary company domain to send acquisition emails. So if you're normally sending under abc.com, and that's your URL, that's your brand, that's your identity, and that's who you send customer emails to, do not use that to do acquisition, because what will happen is you'll have a lot of success with acquisition, and you'll have no success in getting your emails through to your customers. ISPs aren't going to differentiate between the two. You really need to keep those streams of communication separate. Another tool, if you're doing a large-scale deployment, make sure that you modify your creative for every, say, million records, because if you take the same creative and deploy to 20 million, ISPs will filter it because it looks like a large-scale blast of email. But breaking it into different creatives in smaller segments will increase deliverability and engagement. And then some of the other things, and these are things that we really worry about more on our side since we're sending it on your behalf, is the sending reputation. In some cases, we do set people up on their own dedicated domains and dedicated IP addresses, and then we will monitor any complaints, remedy them as quick as possible. Of course, CAN-SPAM compliance, that's an absolute, and really cleanse the data, making sure that any unsubscribes or hard bounces are suppressed from future delivery, and really making sure that it's legitimate offers. We're not spamming, we're not blasting, we're selectively sending relevant offers to people that have that look to have an interest in receiving it. All right, so some of the key challenges. Acquisition email is very much an egalitarian system. It really is driven by how the people receiving the messages like or don't like the email. If they don't like it, you'll go to junk mail or be bounced. If they do like it, you'll get to the open rate, you'll get click-throughs, and you'll get higher engagement. Planning and deployment is really, really important. Planning and pre-deployment. So really make sure you got your throttle rate set so you don't deploy too quickly, too fast. Make sure you've tested a different creative. All those things are very important. Throttling and cadence. Start slow, as I mentioned, and ramp up as you find that you're getting the positive engagement that you're hoping for. All right, so analysis and tuning. This really is another way of saying also reporting. You really need to look at the report, see who clicked, what did they click on, when did they click, was it morning, noon, night, is it a weekend, is it a weekday, how often did they click, did they come back to the email several times? Did the click lead to completing the transaction? Did you see an increase in complaint rates after you sent the second message, third message, the fourth message? Is there anything that you're seeing in the different audiences that you've tested, the different creatives you've tested? And really, what is your engagement ratio? Because that's the important thing that's going to make sure you're successful on all subsequent campaigns. Here's an example. We are working with a major movie company, and their brand was not necessarily sort of known immediately. It was more their movies that were well known. And on the first one, we saw lower open rates and click-through rates than we had hoped for. But through all the different things, by breaking it into smaller and more frequent deployments as opposed to large blocks, and spreading it out over longer delivery periods, using different creative versions. This is actually one where we used a red copy, stronger call to action. Make sure people know why they're going to click on something, what they hope to get, what's behind that click. Better placement of the call to action above the fold instead of below the fold. And then really looked at what different creative versions, what subject lines were getting the highest engagement, and use the best practices from those to continue the deployment. And then we applied also a model to filter emails on the ones that we believed, statistically speaking, were likely to complain. And over just the 45-day span, we were able to increase their open rates, double their open rates, so increased it at more than 100% in just 45 days. So an example of, I think I mentioned before, don't get discouraged. It wasn't working perfectly at the beginning, but we were able to get it better and get it to the point that it's a very viable channel for the company going forward. I think we're about done. So this kind of sums up all the things we talked about and covered. And at this point, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Steve. As we are running out of time here today, we will be answering one quick question and the rest over email. So the question that came in here that we will answer is, how do we know what metrics to look at and what to expect if we have not done it before? Are there general rules or guidelines?
Yeah, they're not widely populated because, again, it really depends on your brand. It sounds like a cop-out, but it really depends on your brand, your offer, and if you're offering, $1 million for free, then you're going to get high engagement rates. So it depends on a lot of different factors. But what I can tell you is, in terms of open rates for acquisition, I think I said earlier, if you're expecting more than 10%, you're going to be disappointed. We're disappointed if it's lower than 3%. So, if you wanted to just, draw a real wide border around some open rates to maybe expect, if you're between 3 to 6 or 7% on a cold acquisition, you're doing pretty good. Above 10, very unlikely. I've seen it. We've seen it. Below 1%, it's probably not a brand or offer, or it's not well targeted. So, I know that's kind of a wide range, but, we get the question a lot, and, I know there's a lot of companies that go, hey, we're going to get you an 8% open rate, which really be careful, because if they've never deployed for you, they have no idea what kind of open rates they're going to get. And that's just a fact. It may be salesmanship, but, I think between 3 to 7 or 8% is a pretty decent outcome. And again, you can determine the point of profitability with our email profitability calculator. Do we have time for one more, Sabina? Or?
Sure. Why don't we do one last one? How do you treat opt-outs and spam versus no engagement at all?
Well, opt-outs are basically anyone who, so there's a couple things. Opt-outs, absolutely, you're required by canned spam to suppress them, honor that opt-out within 10 days. So we manage those and store those so that subsequent campaigns you're not deploying to those. Anyone who clicks spam, what we do, because that's not a unsubscribe, that's not a canned spam thing, ironically enough. That's someone who said, they just clicked the button and said, I didn't like this. And what we do is we actually do suppress those. You don't have to, but it's really good practice to suppress those, because if they weren't happy, if they click spam once, they're going to do it again, and they're just not interested in hearing from you. So we treat them the same as an unsubscribe.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Well, everyone, that was it for today. On behalf of the Relevate team, I would like to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Goodbye. Thank you.